American Football Stories is brought to you by Coach Paint. Coach Paint is a great tool that allows us to add graphics to player highlight clips similar to the graphics you see on TV. Coach Paint offers the ability to clearly tellustrate video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game with Coach Paint today.
What time is it? Game time! It's gonna be special. They gonna talk about this forever.
Welcome to American Football Stories.
Puts his head down, crashes and spins, and dives. Touchdown!
Bringing together the many perspectives that make up college football in the NFL.
Football is one of the greatest sports ever invented.
From players and coaches.
Believe, baby, believe, baby.
Hey, we playing to win right here, fellas.
To the front office and scouts.
The public is finally beginning to catch up, but they don't even know half the truth.
Us against the world, let's get it.
Your hosts, Robert Parker and Nick Knudsen, bring you American Football Stories.
Welcome to the American Football Stories podcast brought to you by Coach Paint. I'm your host, Nick Knudsen. I'm with my co-host, Robert Parker. It's November 29th, 2020. On today's episode, we'll cover Thanksgiving weekend in college football. Now, we've always started the episodes this season with the cancellations, of course, just to acknowledge what was canceled. And like the last few weeks, we're seeing these cancellations pile up here. Let's start out west. Colorado State Air Force canceled. Southern Miss at UAB. San Diego State at Fresno State. Tulsa at Houston. Louisiana Tech at FIU. UTEP at Rice. FAU at Middle Tennessee State. San Jose State at Boise State. Virginia at Florida State. Don't tell Dabo. Oklahoma at West Virginia. Cincinnati, number 7 Bearcats get their game with Temple canceled. And I saved these two for the last, Robert, because I want to talk about the Big Ten real quick. Minnesota, Wisconsin gets canceled. Ohio State, Illinois gets canceled. And I'm going to go on a rant here for a moment because the Ohio State announcement came down Friday night. We're 6 weeks into the Big Ten's 8-game season, with no room for error schedule. And it turns out they should have considered the possibility that they may have needed room for error. I mean, I know that sounds like a crazy concept, but I'm not saying anyone in the Big Ten office didn't know any better when they came up with this Franken-season concept. But when they came up with it, we were at least thrilled that they reversed course on a bad decision and that they were making an effort toward having a season, right? However, this 8-game format has been what we suspected it would be from day one. It's a terrible compromise that's resulting in a half-hearted attempt at a season. The Big Ten has a 6-game minimum requirement for any team to be eligible for the Big Ten title. Well, the top 2 contenders have now had 5 games canceled between them. Ohio State's sitting at 4-0 and staring down the barrel of what should be another cancellation this weekend against Michigan State. They're saying we'll see, but I'm saying the Buckeyes shut down their facilities over the weekend. I'm not personally over optimistic that game's getting played, but they may try to play shorthanded or figure out a way to do it just to keep their eligibility for the Big Ten title game. But you factor in the Big Ten's alleged 21-day waiting period for those who have tested positive. That means someone like Ryan Day, he should be out for the season, right? I'm saying right because I'm not seeing this applied too heavily, but poor Wisconsin, they've only played 3 of 6 games so far. And with Northwestern losing at Michigan State this past weekend here, it's hard to imagine the Wildcats are a lock for the Big Ten title, meaning it'd be nice to see this thing actually play out in the field, but the Badgers aren't going to get a chance to prove it because now they're going to at most play 5 games. People are calling for the Big Ten to change the rule for the eligibility, and maybe they will, maybe they won't. But my point I'm about to make here, and it hurts my heart to do this, as a kid who grew up till he was, or at least lived in Columbus, Ohio for a stretch of his childhood. When I got to know college football, I got to know the Big Ten, got to know Buckeye football. So it hurts my heart, believe me, to say this. But the Big Ten and the Pac-12, they tried to lead on this issue early on. They pushed their thought process on the rest of the country. They forced everyone else's hand. And I hate to say it, But I think they need to be punished for this. And I think they are going to be punished for it. And they're going to be punished by not being selected for the playoffs because Oregon loses this weekend to Oregon State in the Pac-12. And then Washington, USC are still out there unbeaten, but each of them had a canceled game in an already shortened season. This is the year, Rob. Sorry I'm going on this huge rant to start here, but this is the year. I'm more convinced than ever. We've talked about BYU over and over again, and the playoff committee showed no respect to the Cougars in last week's first playoff rankings. But this is a year you got to reward teams like Cincinnati, BYU, Coastal Carolina for going out and playing near full schedules. Not to say they haven't dealt with cancellations, not to say they haven't had their schedules disrupted, just like the Big Ten or Pac-12, but they made the attempt from day one to play, and I think they need to be rewarded for it. There were people who tried to find a way to make things work in a difficult environment, and when it comes to choosing 4 playoff teams, I think the Big Ten and Pac-12 should be left out. Am I being too harsh here?
I mean, you make great points, Nick. I know you went on your rant in regards to the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, but I tell you one team who's definitely keeping an eye on, all the cancellation games that's happened, especially in the Big Ten, and I would say that's Notre Dame. Notre Dame has been on a tear. I mean, if you just think about it, if Notre Dame slips up in the ACC championship against Clemson, would you rather take a one-loss Notre Dame team who played pretty much a full schedule over Ohio State team that probably won't even make the minimum teams play enough minimum games to make their conference championship? So I think Notre Dame is definitely keeping an eye on this, and I feel you. I'm definitely with you, Nick, in regards to just the protocol that the Big Ten kind of laid out there after they said, "Hey, we're going to kick this thing off." It just wasn't really fluid, especially with the other conferences like the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12, who's been doing it since day one. So I think, the Big Ten is definitely going to get left out of the playoffs, especially if Ohio State doesn't meet the minimum required games to go to the conference championship.
Which it's looking more and more like they may not. But I'm saying even if they do at this point, they're going to play what, a maximum of 7 games? At first we were talking about a 9-game season. I do think there's a difference in those 2 extra games. Coastal Carolina, they're about to play their 10th game this week. BYU, they played. What's BYU? Are they 9-0 or 10-0 right now? They're sitting at 9-0, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, I just Cincinnati. Yeah, in Cincinnati, are these teams better than Ohio State? No, I don't think it's a question about better though. At this point, I really don't. I think you got to reward some of these teams for making that effort, and I also think Ohio State will end up having another game canceled at this rate. So, I mean, based on what we've seen elsewhere, I mean, it's a shame. It's a shame, but hey, again, happy the Big Ten and Pac-12 gave it a shot. Not critical of that, but this just screams of like a crappy compromise with the people in charge who were trying to cancel this thing in the first place. Like people, you had a desperate set of people who wanted to play, and then you had a set of people that had some power that gave in on it, but they didn't give up much. So that's why we get this garbage result that we're getting. So it's tough to watch. It really is. But hey, I honestly think you got to reward the teams that are out there playing more games this year. All right. Thursday, November 26th, New Mexico falls to Utah State. Utah State gets their first win. Friday, November 27th, let's go down to Chapel Hill, the number 2 Notre Dame Fighting Irish, who you just brought up. And you made the point I was about to make, actually, Rob. You got a little ahead of it there on me. But I was about to break this point. Notre Dame beats North Carolina 31-17. Excellent defense, solid play out of Ian Book. I think we saw UNC go down the field, score in their first 2 drives, and then get held to a field goal the rest of the game. And that's a pretty good North Carolina offense. But did anyone really have a better weekend than the Irish? Like I'm done hating on the Notre Dame team. I apologize to Notre Dame fans. Y'all have a good team this year. I'll finally admit it. Most years I would not be thrilled with seeing this team in the playoffs, but I think the Big Ten this weekend was a disaster for the Big Ten and the Pac-12. And I think Notre Dame might have been the biggest beneficiary, because even if they end up losing, like really, even if Clemson smacks them in the ACC title, they probably are going to keep a spot in the playoffs at this point, aren't they?
Yeah, that's the way it's looking. I mean, if you just go back and you watch this game, great defensive performance for Notre Dame. They held a high-powered North Carolina offense just to 298 yards. Notre Dame right now is clicking on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. I think one thing the college playoff committee has to look at is, if a team is a good team or versus a team being a complete team. And I think Notre Dame is definitely not one of the best teams, in my opinion, but I do think they're one of the more complete teams that we have, in the top 5, top 10 rankings, that the poll has showed so far. I just love this Notre Dame team on both sides of the ball. You got Ian Book, just like you mentioned, Nick, who's playing great ball. He's not turning the ball over. Great running game. And what about those tight ends, man? It really seems like the tight end position is evolving into a mismatch problem. And Notre Dame has two great athletes at the tight end position that can, be a mismatch against any team out there.
Did you see that goal line formation where Notre Dame rolled out 4 tight ends?
Yeah, that's another thing that, if you have to play Notre Dame moving forward, that's what you're going to have to deal with.
Yeah.
So I mean, they have like a bevy of tight ends that, can run routes and catch out the backfield. You can line them up. It really seems like they have a bunch of George Kittles around there on that campus, the way that they play.
Yeah, it's definitely a physical group that can also go out and catch the ball. They got really all world do it all tight ends there in Notre Dame. But I the more I watch this Irish team, the more I like them. So I'm coming around on them. I'm actually looking forward to the ACC championship game, especially because Clemson. We saw how Clemson played. We'll get to them in a minute here, but man, they played angry against Pitt, and if we see an angry Clemson against this Notre Dame team, I'm looking forward to it. I'm not sure. I'm not totally convinced they'll do well against Clemson, but I do think they've definitely earned their shot. You can't take that away from them. All right, let's go down to Austin, Texas. Number 13, Iowa State Cyclones 23, Texas 20. Hey, good fight here by Texas. Once again, they fall up short. And Rob, I know everyone's down on Texas and Tom Herman and everything, but you've lost 3 games this season. You lost late to Iowa State here by a field goal. You lose in overtime to Oklahoma, 53-45, and you lose to TCU by 2 points. You're not that far off at Texas right now. I'm not sure. Maybe am I just the guy who defends all the coaches on the hot seat? I feel like that this season because I mean, even though Harbaugh is not helping me with each and every performance here, but Tom Herman, not a bad coach at Texas. Like I think that Texas is not put together the run they want to, obviously, but you're in the hunt. You're in this thing. If the ball bounces left instead of right a few times, we might be looking at Texas in position for a Big 12 title and a playoff spot. But bounces haven't gone their way this year. Good performance by Iowa State. Scrappy as always. Breece Hall gets 91 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Good interview with Matt Campbell after the game, too. Got emotional about his team.
Yeah, I mean, I think this Iowa State team, they kind of got a rude awakening early in the year. When they lost to a Sun Belt opponent, out the gate. And I think they kind of got their bearings back underneath them. Matt Campbell, definitely got the big win against, Oklahoma. So that was a huge win for that program. And they're pretty much just another step closer to the Big 12 championship game. And Nick, we do have this conversation about you defending coaches on the hot seat. I think Tom Herman's been there, not long enough, but I'm not going to defend Tom Herman as much I would defend a Scott Frost because, he haven't gotten all his recruiting classes in there right now. But Tom Herman has. It really seems like, Texas should be in the contention to win the Big 12 championship year in and year out with all the talent that they have in that state from a recruit perspective. And they're not. So I think moving forward, that organization is going to have to look, and that university is going to have to look close at to see if Tom Herman is the guy or not.
Do you think they're far off of winning Big 12 title? Like they've been playing. Would you say that Herman has played Oklahoma fairly tough? His teams play Oklahoma tough, don't they?
I tell you what, I compare Texas to Michigan right now, and I think Texas is a little bit further along than Michigan. So Texas is definitely there in contention to win the Big 12, but they just have to do it consistently to kind of be, one of the
Right.
big name brands that, we think Texas are. But Texas hasn't been that big household brand in a while. I mean, everyone remembers Vince Young and the run that they had, but after that, they really haven't done so much.
But how much of the frustration with Herman is from the fact that it's been a while and people are impatient and you keep throwing names around like Urban Meyer to Texas, and then people are like, oh yeah, Urban. A couple years ago they're talking about Saban before Herman got there. But hey, look, the one thing I'll say about Texas is if Texas made the playoff and they were going up against Alabama in the first round, they're not even close, right? They're getting dusted in that game. But they've played Oklahoma tough. They are consistently tough out in the Big 12 week in and week out. And I know it's a little frustrating, but maybe you just need a few pieces to turn over. I love Sam Ehlinger. I do. I think he's been a great quarterback for the Longhorns. He's a good college quarterback, but he's not playing on Sundays, is he?
I don't see him playing on Sundays.
Exactly.
If so, maybe in a Taysom Hill type of role, but especially with the evolving of the offense and letting the quarterback run. But once again, he's a great college quarterback. But if you Sam Ehlinger in that Iowa State game, did you see him take that sack late in that game?
Right.
You're a veteran leader. You can't take that sack, and I think that's the thing that the fans in Texas, stress about having that type of quarterback play. I don't think they had that type of quality quarterback play in a while. And I've always mentioned this on this pod, Nick. You know this. Being a Florida Gator fan, we know when we don't have the quarterback position playing, really well or pretty decent, the whole team is going to struggle.
Look, Gators are a perfect example. Look at Kyle Trask in 2019 versus Kyle Trask in 2020. And 2019 is a good, serviceable quarterback that'll keep you in a lot of games. And if he's playing well, he could take over a game like Sam Ehlinger. But 2020 is a dominant force. And he's controlling the game from start to finish. And you have to plan around him. Yeah, he's a factor. And I don't think Ehlinger has been that guy. He's been a very good quarterback. You could certainly do a lot worse than Sam Ehlinger. But I don't think he's that elite prospect. And that's what, to me, I think people are looking into the recruiting, and you lose a 5-star quarterback, Quinn Ewers out of Texas to go to Ohio State. And I know Ohio State's been picking off guys left and right out of Texas. Look, it's got to be frustrating. But on the other hand, the Longhorns are not that far off with Herman. They just need a few players in the right spots, and I really think they could do it. But it's also Texas, and you got crazy money, and that's not exactly a place where you get a lot of time. But outside of Urban Meyer, can you really do a lot better than Tom Herman in the hire process right now, Rob?
I mean, I think not right now. I don't think it's anyone that you can, bring in that would be better than Tom Herman at this point. Maybe Joe Brady, but once again, he's an offensive coordinator in the NFL.
And the NFL wants him.
Would he want to go back to college, or do he just want to kind of see where his career goes from, the offensive coordinator position, hopefully one day being a head coach in the NFL. So it's slim pickings out there when it comes to head coaching jobs, this upcoming season. But we shall see where the chips fall and where some of these coaches land up next year.
Hey, look, I know that if you told me, is Herman finishing year 4 or year 5 right now? I should have looked that up before the show. I want to say, is it year 4 of Herman? And we have.
I'm definitely drawing a blank on that, but I'm pretty sure it's year 4.
It's at least 4. I think it's year 4.
Yeah.
But if you told me year 4, Tom Herman, no Big 12 titles, I'm disappointed. But you've been semi-close. The guy's not completely. This isn't like a Will Muschamp at Florida thing or Jim McElwain. You're not. Even Charlie Strong at Texas wasn't even close. It wasn't close. And I love Charlie Strong. Wasn't close at Texas. I think if you're Texas, you got to hold on to time. You gotta give it a couple more seasons. Hopefully, you can figure out another situation. Maybe overturn a couple spots, and maybe Texas figures it out. But you're going to be contending with Oklahoma year in year out. So it's really up to you. But I think you can almost do more damage if you hire someone. I mean, hire someone, you start the process over a little bit. So unless there's that, or maybe there's like that Dan Mullen floating around out there, If you go grab that guy, by all means, go get him. But and not literally Dan Mullen, but like a Dan Mullen, where I don't think the Gators fan base would have picked Dan Mullen as their first selection a few years ago. But he's been a great fit. So if there's a great fit sitting out there for Texas, by all means, go get it. But I just think Herman's been close. He's been close. Just hasn't worked out.
Maybe Will Muschamp gets that
there you go, baby.
head coaching and waiting job that was going to come his way when Mac Brown was there. So
full circle.
Maybe it comes full circle, and Will Muschamp comes back to Texas. So we shall see in regards to that.
What about Mac Brown coming back to Texas, leaving North Carolina for Texas? That would be wild.
That will be even wilder right there. But I definitely don't see Mac Brown leaving North Carolina. I think he's doing an amazing job with that program, and I don't see him, going back into the Big 12.
Why would he want that headache?
Yeah.
Enjoy your life.
He's doing really good down in Chapel Hill.
Lose 3 games a year at North Carolina and be a hero. Everyone will love you, and you'll keep North Carolina. You'll make the ACC more interesting. Just stick it out. It's all good. All right, let's move on. Oregon falls to Oregon State 41-38, and there was a lot of fog, Rob, but I can't think of 2 better colored jerseys to play in a game of fog, with that neon highlighter yellow versus the bright orange of Oregon State. Those 2 jerseys, that was one of the best jersey games of the year I've seen. And by best, I mean pretty tough to watch with your eyes, but it was pretty cool looking too.
Yeah, those jerseys definitely were pretty cool to look at. Especially in all that fog. And I tell you what, I really thought Oregon was going to come out and dominate this game, but I was definitely wrong. Jamar Jefferson just kind of cut this defense up. And, Mario Cristobal, one thing that that he's known for is his defense. And I tell you what, it was non-existent. Oregon State really came out to play, and it's a rivalry game, and pretty much Oregon came out flat and they got beat. And pretty much that's probably going to be the game that knocked them out the college football playoff, with that loss right there.
Well, they give up 22 fourth quarter points, and they were really in control of this for the most part on Friday night. But Oregon State just kind of hung around. I mean, at one point, Oregon was up 31-19 in this one. And this was, and let me see, when did they score that touchdown? It was with 6 minutes and 43 seconds left in the third. They scored that TD. I mean, they were really in control. You just felt like, oh, there's no way, even if Oregon State might score another time or two, but Oregon's going to keep scoring. And then the Oregon defense just stepped up. They only allowed one more score, and they end up scoring a last second touchdown to win the game. But I really thought the Oregon State defense played well down the stretch, but cool play at the end though. I mean, you feel bad. The starting quarterback for Oregon State goes off the field, backup Chance Nolan comes on the field, scores from 1 yard out on the quarterback sneak on 4th and 1 with 33 seconds left to give the Beavers a 41-38 victory. So that's going to be a cool trivia question down the line. But again, we talked about it. This weekend was a disaster for the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. This game really hurts the Pac-12.
It really does. And I know, for Oregon to get into the college football playoff, it was definitely probably a long shot. But, after this loss, it definitely, they won't make it. They won't be there. And, just with the cancellation of games, we saw USC cancel. So it's going to be really hard for a Pac-12 team to get into college football playoff.
Yeah, I'm not expecting it at this point this season. Let's go out to the Big Ten on Friday. Nebraska falls to Iowa again, 26-20. The Huskers are 1-4 on the season. Adrian Martinez goes 18 of 20 passing, but Iowa uses a strong effort from Tyler Goodson on the ground, 30 carries, 111 yards to get the job done. And this was not the prettiest football you'll ever see, as you'd expect with Iowa typically, but it was just steady, kept the effort going. Iowa holds Nebraska to a fourth quarter shutout to get the win. And I gotta say, one of the jokes I'm really getting tired of on Twitter is, oh, this is Nebraska fought so hard to play this season to put this product on the field. It's like, yeah, they fought to play. Like, is that a problem? You got a problem with that? Like, I don't understand. Like you're making fun of them for wanting to play. I don't understand that.
Yeah, I tell you what, this is probably one of the more competitive games that Nebraska has played all season long. And they actually had a chance to kind of win this game.
Mm-hmm.
Adrian Martinez actually, played fairly well. But once again, it really just seems like he's not playing up to his level of expectation and definitely his ranking coming out of high school. It really seemed like he kind of regressed in regards to his freshman year. He's just really not looking at being the same quarterback. And they're bringing Dylan McCaffrey off the bench. So you know what they say. If
Go ahead,
say that again, Nick.
Luke McCaffrey.
Luke McCaffrey, excuse me on that one. But
Yeah.
yeah, you know what the old saying says: if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one quarterback, and that's the kind of thing we have with Nebraska and Scott Frost. But I tell you what, they did come out to play and they played fairly well, and they could have easily won that game. But Iowa, they just kind of continue to do what they do. They play defense and they run the ball and they grind you out. So a good gritty win for Iowa.
Let's go down the American Conference. Scott Frost's old team, the UCF Knights, they knock off USF 58-46. And another solid highlighter uniform cooking down there at USF. The slime green, they called it. I dug them. You thought they were ugly as hell, though, right?
Yeah, I really did. I didn't like that combination right there.
Couldn't disagree more. I loved it. And you know what? I don't like seeing that look on like a team with tradition, but if you're someone like USF and you're trying to flash and catch recruits' eyes and say, "Hey, look at us," I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that with USF. UCF's got some pretty good jerseys, and they got to compete with that. So it's all about catching UCF at this point. And I'll tell you, you saw some hope. This USF team finishes 1-8 on the season. Jeff Scott, former Clemson offensive coordinator's first year, and what excited me about this game, the only reason I even want to talk about it is quarterback Jordan McLeod had a day. He ends up, Dylan McCaffrey again. There he comes. He came up twice in this podcast. The man's not playing football this year right now. Dylan Gabriel at USF. We expect him to have great days, and he did in this one. 336 yards, 4 touchdowns and an interception. But Jordan McLeod, who is just a sophomore out of Tampa here, he comes in and he has over 400 yards passing, 32 of 46, 404 yards, and 3 touchdowns. USF, they kept up. They kept this thing interesting. I ended up tuning in for the second half of this because it was just a shootout. It was a lot of fun to watch. Did you catch much of this game?
I did, and I'm right there with you in regards to Jordan McLeod. Definitely one of the best games of his young career. 404 yards and 4 touchdowns, and ran another in to kind of keep the Bulls within striking distance. But moving forward, it definitely seems like they have a good quarterback where they can kind of build this program if they can kind of get those recruits in. And we know playing in the state of Florida, you can always kind of get those playmakers in and hopefully, get this program turned around.
And we know Jeff Scott has a good recruiting template coming from Clemson, don't we?
Oh, yes, definitely.
And so, listen, you got a lot of close losses this season for USF. They played Cincinnati tough. They ended up losing 28-7, but that was it. They played them tough that game. Temple, they lose by 2 points. Memphis, they lose by 1 point. You hang in there with UCF this weekend. It wasn't a good season at 1-8 for USF, but good enough. Good enough. Nice start. Is a rebuilding year. Jeff Scott's first year. And if you're a USF fan, I'm telling you, UCF seems like they're miles ahead of you right now, but you're not far off. You're gonna catch them in a couple of years here. I think this is gonna be a hell of a rivalry. They call it the War on I-4 down here with Interstate 4 connecting Tampa and Orlando there. So they call it the War on I-4. UCF's totally dominated it. Expect USF to strike back in the next couple of years with Jeff Scott building up that Bulls football program. All right, Liberty crushes UMass 45-0, Wyoming 45, UNLV 14, Central Michigan 31, Eastern Michigan 23. Stanford wins the Axe, 1-point win over Cal, 24-23. Let's jump to Saturday. Auburn, Alabama, the Iron Bowl. Not a lot to talk about here. This is a pretty boring football game. 42-13. Nick Saban misses it due to COVID. Mac Jones passes for over 300 yards and the quietest 5 touchdowns you'll ever see. Najee Harris, 11 carries, 96 yards, 1 touchdown. And your boy Devontae Smith, 7 receptions, 171 yards, 2 TDs, including 1 touchdown where he's just streaking 15 yards behind the defense. Auburn has just proven time and time again, they're a good football team, but when they step up and play elite competition, offense is no match for it. And I think if I'm an Auburn fan, I'm very concerned about the future of Bo Nix going forward.
Yeah, you kind of want to see Bo Nix kind of come in and might not necessarily go to head with Mac Jones and kind of win these games, but you kind of want to see him play fairly decent, and he did. No touchdowns and 2 interceptions. But I tell you what, it has a lot of people was on my timeline saying that this, Auburn Alabama game is, one of the better games that we have year in and year out. But it was definitely not one of the best games of this year so far.
Not this year.
A complete blowout, complete letdown for Auburn and Bo Nix and company. I tell you what, it really seems like Alabama is on a mission. Without Nick Saban on the sideline, and you beat your rival by 4 touchdowns, I tell you what, this team is definitely on a mission, and I think it's going to be hard to kind of knock them off right now.
SEC did some rescheduling over the weekend, and they bumped that LSU game into the December 5th slot for Alabama. So right now, as it sits, Alabama LSU will play on December 5th, which is next weekend at 8:00, and Florida will play Tennessee at 3:30. So that's what it's looking like for the top 2 contenders in the East and the West heading into next week. Clemson 52, Pitt 17. 31-0 first quarter. That's really all you need to know in this one. Clemson just absolutely steamrolls the Pitt Panthers. 4 picks out of Kenny Pickett. Trevor Lawrence, welcome back to college football for a few more games here. Goes for 400 yards, 2 touchdowns. ETN pops in the end zone twice. And one of my favorite players in college football this year, who gets a ton of love on the Clemson broadcast, but we haven't talked about him much, is Cornell Powell. Number 17, the receiver for Clemson. This guy just makes play after play. We got to do a Coach Paint tape on him at some point, because he has had excellent season for the Tigers. 6 receptions, 176 yards for a touchdown. Dabo has him playing angry. I have a feeling that's mostly why he's been complaining in the media about the whole Florida State shenanigans. I think he's just trying to keep his guys focused. So the Tigers got a road game with Virginia Tech next week. And outside of that, it's looking like it's all set for a matchup with Clemson Notre Dame in the ACC title game.
Yeah, that's what it looking like. It's definitely going to be two trains on the same track going to collide, and that's going to be Notre Dame and Clemson once again. But this time it's going to be Trevor Lawrence. He's going to be at the helm. Hopefully, barring any COVID mix-ups and shake-ups moving forward. But I tell you what, this Clemson team is kind of like Alabama. They're on a mission. Dabo definitely was going to get the guys riled up because of all the talk in the media of them not playing last week. So they were going to come out and just play a great game, and they really did on both sides of the ball. I just really think this Clemson team is you can kind of pencil them in for the college football playoffs.
Yep, that's the way I'm seeing it too. All right, the number 5, Texas A&M Aggies 20, LSU 7. Now, Rob, obviously we do our homework on every game. We'll watch highlights and catch up and do our best if we didn't watch the game. But how intently did you watch this? This was the game I watched last night. So that's why I'm asking you. Did you watch play-by-play, or did you just kind of check in on it and watch the highlights and catch up and do your homework?
Yeah, I didn't check in on this game. I did kind of catch some highlights and, read some articles and whatnot or what have you. Yeah. But I definitely didn't watch this game from beginning to end.
So let me tell you something. I watched this game from start to finish because I picked LSU to cover at plus 15. 20-7, Tigers did it. But this was such an awful football game. This was gross. Like, as fun as that last trip to Kyle Field was for LSU, that 7-0 Classic with Burrow, where Coach O's getting the Gatorade bath too soon. This Texas A&M team, they just played gritty defense, which it was a little fun seeing some old school defense, because LSU and A&M both played very solid on the defensive side of the football. We haven't seen a lot of that, especially in the SEC this year. But this LSU offense was horrible to watch. And A&M ends up getting 1 second half score on a pick 6. That's the only way they scored in the second half. The LSU defense did a great job shutting them down. They just kept making mistakes at the wrong time. There'd be penalties. They end up having 11 penalties for 79 yards. They only threw for 231 yards, but they only rushed for 36 yards. But you think those numbers sound bad, but then you flip over, you look at Texas A&M. Kellen Mond, all they did during the broadcast, by the way, was talk about Texas A&M in the playoff, and all I kept looking at with my two eyes was saying, why should Texas A&M get the 4 spot? I don't give a crap that they beat Florida at this point. I don't. Good win. Nice win. Mond goes 11 for 34 in this game for 105 yards. The only player on the offense for Texas A&M that really put up good stats was Isaiah Spiller, 27 carries, 141 yards. I'm telling you, I'm not doing this to insult Texas A&M. If you're an Aggies fan, you know the truth. You're 6-1. You may be technically on the outside post looking to sneak in the playoff spot, but at this point, I'm totally in favor of throwing Notre Dame and Clemson in, regardless of the result of the ACC title game before this Texas A&M team, because I'll be damned if I want to watch Alabama rip Texas A&M by another 4 touchdowns in round 1 of the playoffs. Didn't Texas A&M have their shot already?
I mean, yeah. I mean, Texas A&M, they're one of those teams that we look at like Notre Dame. So it's kind of like we didn't have a lot of faith and confidence in Notre Dame early in the year, and I think that's how I kind of feel about this Texas A&M team. I just don't have faith in Kellen Mond to get the job done. Once again, they're just one of those teams that's gonna slip up, and you feel like they're gonna choke. Kind of like Oklahoma State in the Big 12. One of those teams out there that they have a great season early in the year, but they just wind up choking.
I mean, they are 6-1. The remaining games are Auburn and Tennessee, and they're talking about the SEC opened up the SEC championship date on December 19th for more games. So there's potential they could also play Ole Miss. So they have 3 games left potentially. Based on what we've seen out of Auburn against decent defenses, which A&M plays some good defense, I don't have a lot of hope for the Tigers pulling an upset. I absolutely don't believe in Tennessee upsetting A&M. Maybe Ole Miss can do it. Maybe Ole Miss can like just go crazy on offense and play a better game than normal on defense. So there's a slight chance A&M can slip up, but it's not looking likely at this point. I'm thinking the Aggies could get to 9-1. But what I'm saying is, like, what I've seen on the field, this is the year. Give an undefeated BYU a chance. A&M does not deserve the 4th spot. If it's the 3rd spot, give it to them. If somehow that happens, I don't know if the math's possible on that, but if somehow that happens, then they're definitely in. Obviously, let them in. But if they have to play Alabama at that 4th spot, they had their shot. Give it someone else, because I'll tell you what, this A&M team, they're going to do the exact same thing against Alabama, and they'll lose by 28, and we'll be saddled with a crappy semifinal game. Plus, are you telling me that we're going to have to watch Alabama A&M and then Notre Dame Clemson play? Or I don't know. If it's A&M and Clemson and Alabama Notre Dame, I'm more interested. But I don't know. I was not impressed with A&M's effort against LSU last night. Good defense, nothing cooking on offense. All right, let's flip over to the Florida Gators, 34-10 over Kentucky. Kyle Trask, Heisman front runner, 256 yards, 3 touchdowns. Gators hold Kentucky to 221 yards, 62 yards passing. But you wouldn't have thought the stats would end up that ugly for Kentucky if you watched the first 4 possessions of the game, because Kentucky held the ball and basically did what they wanted, but they can only manage a touchdown and a field goal out of it. So the score looks lopsided, but if you watch the first half, Florida returned a punt right before halftime because the punter kicked it the wrong way. He kicked it right instead of left, and the return team ran the wrong direction, giving Kadarius Toney an open field to run it back. Outside of that and a fake punt by the Gators that led to their first touchdown, Florida didn't have much cooking the first half of this game. They come out, they dominate the second half. The score looks like it's lopsided, but I had Florida covering by 25.5 in my picks column. So I was a little disappointed when they didn't stick it in for a touchdown from the 1-yard line. But all in all, Gators get the job done. Not really much to complain about here. If you're a Gator fan, little things here or there. And I think most of the things, if you're a Gator fan, that you're complaining about just has to do with the fact that you have anxiety about playing at Alabama. And you're starting to have fever dreams about Devontae Smith running behind Sean Davis 10 yards downfield open to put Alabama up 7-0 in the SEC title game.
Yeah, I tell you what, definitely a big performance from Kyle Pitts. Welcome back. One of the better tight ends that we have in the nation. And I tell you what, Florida definitely didn't look like a top 10 team in the first half against Kentucky. Kentucky actually came out and played them fairly well in that first half. And just like you said, that Kadarius Toney punt return right before half kind of, got the momentum rolling for the Gators in the second half, and they just kind of walked away with it. But just like you said, it's going to come down to this Florida defense holding up. We know the cow-to-cow connection is one of the most lethal connections that we have, in the nation. But, that Florida defense, which defense is going to, come out to play? Is it going to be a defense that's going to get pressure on a Mac Jones, or a defense that can stop the run, or is going to be those defense that gives up those big chunk plays? So I think that's the anxiety that the Florida fans have that you're talking about, Nick.
All right, how you feeling about the Alabama game? We'll probably do a few of these in the next couple of weeks here, but right now, sitting where we're at in the season, how you feeling about Alabama, Florida?
I definitely, if a line was to come out, I can definitely see, Alabama by 14, 17. I can definitely see that line being that much. But once again, that Alabama is just on a roll right now, and they're playing complete football on both sides of the ball. And I think that's one thing that, the bookmakers is going to look at, that Florida defense. And that's probably going to be the downfall of Florida moving forward, especially if they're trying to compete to get in the college football playoff.
Those Alabama receivers are going to be a problem. They're going to be a problem.
Without Jalen Waddle. So I think, Nick Saban in that wide receiver room is definitely okay, even with the loss of Jalen Waddle. They just have too many weapons. Same thing with Clemson. Those are two teams that bring in those recruiting classes year in and year out. So definitely those receiving rooms, Florida's going to have to come to play on the defense side of the ball if they have to play one of those teams.
I also want to acknowledge my conspiracy theory about Alabama having the COVID vaccine is wrong. I want to acknowledge that. I'll acknowledge when I'm wrong. Thought Nick Saban took a vaccine to get on the field against Georgia, and they were just calling it a false negative test. But turns out the University of Alabama is not hoarding a COVID vaccine until their team is out of national championship contention. So I was wrong about that. So let's move on. Big Ten football. Northwestern can't get it done. The week after they beat Wisconsin, moving in the top 10, people are talking about Northwestern in the playoffs. 29-20, lost to Michigan State. The Spartans used a quick start here. The 75-yard touchdown pass on the second drive of the game. Interception that's close to a pick six. They ran it down to inside the Northwestern 20, settle for a field goal to go up 10-0. And on their next drive, they put together a 13-play, 85-yard drive to go down the field, go up 17-0 early. And for the rest of the game, Northwestern was just slowly picking their way back. But at the very end, they just kept shooting themselves in the foot through a critical interception late in the fourth quarter, and Michigan State turned it into a field goal that really served. That ended up being the difference in the game. So big upset by Sparty. Second time we've seen this Michigan State team rise up and beat what we thought was a much better football team going into this game. I'm a little bit out of the loss with this Michigan State team. Help me out here, Rob. What's going on? Why can they get up for? Obviously we know Michigan's not a great team at this point, but why can they get up for these games and then look so terrible some other weeks?
Yeah, I think that's just part of the process right now. Mel Tucker coming in, being a new head coach, and kind of getting his staff kind of, situated and getting his recruits in. I think right now you're going to see that week-to-week performance where, you play good one week and you have a drop-off the next week. You're not going to see that consistency, definitely not in year one. With Mel Tucker, Michigan State.
Georgia, 45, South Carolina, 16. Indiana survives Maryland, 27-10. This one was a little close for a while, but Indiana pulls it out. Coastal Carolina, 49, Texas State, 14, never in doubt. Okie State survives a shootout with Texas Tech, 50-44. And Penn State gets its first win of the season going into Ann Arbor, beating Michigan, 27-17. I was hopeful that Michigan had their situation figured out at quarterback after watching Cade McNamara come in and play well against Rutgers last week. But the Wolverines, he can only manage to get 91 passing yards. They only manage 112 on the day. This Michigan team continues to struggle, continues to lack identity. And at this point, this is definitely a lost season for Michigan football. The Wolverines have Maryland and Ohio State remaining on the schedule. I know the cries for Harbaugh are going to keep growing louder, but I do you care if you're Michigan? Are you just like, at this point, you had a bunch of opt-outs, guys like Nico Collins. I know they had a tackle along the line. They lost due to injury in the season. It's just everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. Murphy's Law type of year for Michigan, or is it time to make a change and move on in your mind?
Yeah, I think, it might be time to kind of make a change and move on. But, you tip your hats off to James Franklin and Penn State for actually coming out and not holding their hats down for the season that they have and came out being competitive and getting a win. I think, if you look at this Penn State team, you look at their freshmen, they're going to be pretty decent moving forward. For example, we got Parker Washington, who's shown the ability to make big time plays in every game so far. So I think Penn State is moving in the right direction. They're just having a really, really bad season this year for whatever reason that is, whether it's COVID related, whether, it's players opting out, whatever the recipe it is for them having a bad year, that's what's kind of happening right now. But I think Penn State moving forward is going to be okay. But looking at Michigan, they're just, they're not playing very, very good ball. And I don't know what the reason is. And it just really seems like Harbaugh could at least get the guys up and kind of get them motivated. But that's not even happening. So with that being said, it might be another time for someone else to come and step in.
I saw he pulled McNamara and put Milton in at the end of the game. Just no identity on offense, no patience to let anything develop. I got to think that they got to figure out something on that offensive side of the ball. They really do. So I think we're going to see a shakeup to some degree in Ann Arbor in the offseason, though I expect Harbaugh to be back, but that's just what I would do. So giving an opinion on that. Not that I don't know a damn thing. Just giving my opinion. Western Michigan beats NIU. Northern Illinois 30-27. Ohio 52. Bowling Green 10. Buffalo 70. Kent State 41. Maction football. This game in here by special request from Robert Parker. Jared Patterson goes for crazy high 409 yards and 8 touchdowns on 36 carries. That's all well and good, Rob, but did you know he also rushed for 301 yards and 4 touchdowns last week against Bowling Green?
Yeah, he's been having a heck of a season. And I just love seeing him run. It just seems like, once he gets through the secondary, his little legs keeps churning and moving. He kind of reminds me of a bigger Darren Sproles, back in his Kansas State days. But I tell you this, rushing for over 300 yards in the last 2 games, I think it's only one other guy out there who actually accomplished that feat. And I know we're not doing the trivia anymore. Nick, we kind of laid off that. But if you could give me, the person who actually ran for 300 yards in 2 back-to-back games, you can take it for the rest of the year. You can take the win for the rest of the year if you can name it.
Oh man, back-to-back 300-yard games.
Yep.
I remember, was it a few years ago? I remember P-Ryan. Did P-Ryan do that?
Well, I know P-Ron had the record for, the most yards in the game, but he didn't go back-to-back games for rushing for 300.
Back-to-back 300 rushing yards. Huh. No, I don't know that.
Yeah, actually, this guy won the Heisman that year, and that would be the name of Ricky Williams out of Texas that we talked about earlier.
Man.
So I know you remember those Ricky Williams days.
Yeah, when was that? Was that when he played Texas A&M during that Heisman campaign? Was Texas A&M one of them?
During his Heisman campaign year.
Man, that's incredible. Yeah, back-to-back 3. That just looks like, remember when you used to play, did you used to play the old NCAA football game?
Yeah.
409 yards and 8 touchdowns. That just looks like you had a guy in the Heisman race and you just wanted to lock it up late in the season. That's what that game looks like to me.
Yeah. So, but I really love, Jared Patterson. I think he can actually transition well on the next level. He could beat you in a multitude of ways. He could beat you with power. He can beat you at speed, and he's a patient runner. So I just love watching action, especially Buffalo and this team. I think they have a good team, and a good program. So I just love this Buffalo program.
Well, definitely stirred up some excitement this weekend. Good to see Buffalo making some noise. And that's your pick to win the MAC this year. So I know you're all about the Bulls. Ball State goes into the Glass Bowl and beats Toledo 27-24. SMU falls to East Carolina 52-38, and a little bit of a surprising upset there. Georgia State wins the rivalry game against Georgia Southern 30-24. NC State 36, Syracuse 29. Did you see how that game ended, Rob?
Yeah, man. What a bummer. What a bummer on that game.
Man, Rex Culpepper getting up there. Syracuse driving into NC State territory late for anyone who didn't see it. Syracuse quarterback Rex Culpepper gets up there after completing a pass on third down. The clock's still running. He gets the snap off in time for one more play, but he's not thinking. He ends up spiking the ball to stop the clock, but it was fourth down.
It's fourth down. Yeah.
Also ends up being the final play of the game. So not brain wasn't completely on, had the right idea in most situations. It's just not that one. NC State preserves the win 36-29 in what's been a very difficult year for Syracuse football. All right, let's go to the SEC. This game made a lot of headlines, but not because of what happened on the field. 41-0, Missouri beats Vanderbilt. Well, actually, technically what happened on the field, not because of the game itself. The game itself was pretty terrible, but Vanderbilt makes history. Sarah Fuller is the first female player to suit up and step on the field in a Power 5 football game. She ends up kicking a squib kick over to the right. A lot of people on Twitter didn't seem to think that was intentional, and that was very clearly intentional to me. She put it exactly where they told her to put it. It looked like, because the entire Vandy coverage unit ran right to that spot. Ended up being a pretty good kick, in my opinion.
Yeah, it looked like a really good kick in my opinion too. You call it a squib kick, and it really seems like the Gunners that was running down on coverage. It seemed like they really could have got that ball if they made a better effort.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed seeing it. It definitely kind of reminded me. It gave me. I don't know if you ever seen the movie Unnecessary Roughness back in the day, Nick. That's one of my favorite football movies. When they actually have the female kicker from the soccer team kind of come in and kick the field goal. So that's what it kind of reminded me of, and I definitely enjoyed seeing it.
Yeah, it's a cool moment, and it's definitely something that, hey, there's plenty of women that can kick a football. I think, especially if you're looking for like a specialist. I know, like our coach Kevin Kelly that we had on the podcast from Arkansas, he uses some women's soccer players to do the onside kicks and everything. If you can kick a ball, you can kick a ball. Why not? But great to see. Unfortunate news for Vandy is they end up canning Derek Mason right after the game, or really they ended up doing it today on Sunday. Here we're recording on Sunday. Derek Mason era had its good moments at times. I wouldn't say they had the highs of the James Franklin era, but he was a good hire. He coming over from Stanford. He understood the culture with Vanderbilt, understood that high-level academic, what type of player to look for. I always liked Derek Mason. He didn't quite bring the showmanship aspect that Franklin could to a job, though, did he? And it's just, I feel like Vanderbilt's prestige and a little bit of their profile kind of suffered under him to that degree, where he wasn't that big interview that James Franklin was.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that one, Nick. And I tell you what, whatever head coach comes into this Vanderbilt job is definitely going to be tough sledding. Once again, you mentioned the fact that Vanderbilt being an academic school, having everything kind of situated with its athletes, kind of like a Stanford or Northwestern. Even in the SEC, it's still kind of going to be kind of hard to kind of, bring in those type of recruits. But if you can get the right guy in, the right guy that has a culture surround him, I think you can do well. Kind of same thing with kind of Rutgers. I know it's a different type of academic school, but you don't want to be the doormat of your conference year in and year out. And if you bring in that right coach, kind of like Greciano, we're going to get into talking about Rutgers later on. I think you can kind of do some damage.
Yeah, I think you either got to go the route of a guy who has a little NFL experience, or, which I think is probably not the better option, because if you're trying to go after kids who are looking to have an NFL career, do I want to go? Basically, Shiano's positioning Rutgers as almost a fallback school for some of these, 3 to 5 star players who don't work out elsewhere, especially kids from New Jersey who go out of town, come home, play football for us. And I think that's going to be something that's going to be interesting to see how that develops. But that's not going to make you Big Ten champion or a national champion. You could be a good competitive program doing things that way. And that's really all you can ask for at Vanderbilt. But at Vandy, if you're running that program, Rob, would you try to make a conventional hire, or would you go off the board a little bit and do something different?
I think you have to go off the board and kind of do something different, kind of shake up that program, and kind of get away with what you've been doing so far. It hasn't really worked to this point, so I think you kind of have to shake things up, if you ask me.
So then you shouldn't be talking about conventional names like a Billy Napier or like Jamie Chatwell at Coastal Carolina or endless list. Let's put an endless list of people out there, right? Alabama assistant who can recruit well, this and that. Like, I think you go way off the board, and I'm gonna say it. The guy came on our podcast, and I know it's not just because he came on our podcast, and I loved our interview with him, but why not go after a guy like Kevin Kelly, who is not going to punt, is going to kick onside kicks every time? If you're Vanderbilt and you're not going to win stacking player to player, don't you have to win by some other unconventional means? And maybe if you're not willing to go that extreme with me, do you go with someone like who's the Army coach right now? Jeff. Why am I blanking on his last name? Army head coach. I'm Googling it. Sorry. Jeff Monken. Sorry. I thought it was Monken, and then I thought, no, Todd Monken is the Georgia OC. I was getting it mixed up. Sorry. Jeff Monken. Do you go with someone like Jeff Monken and just run the triple option at Vanderbilt? Which, by the way, as a Florida fan, I pray to God Vandy does not convert to the triple option, because that would just be a pain in the neck to deal with every single year. But just by me saying that, doesn't that kind of signal that maybe that's the right thing to do? But triple option football is just not that fun to watch. But then again, neither is Vanderbilt football so far. So what do you think of that? Am I too far out there?
I don't think you're too far out there. I definitely agree. You definitely have to go off the radar and kind of bring someone in that's going to kind of shake up things and kind of bring some excitement to the program. And, not just go out there and just be the doormat of the SEC. And I know Derek Mason tried. He definitely brought in a great culture and everything. But, you're going to have to get those athletes here and there. If not, you're definitely going to have to get a top tier quarterback. And that's one thing you kind of, change your program. Ask Stanford and Brian Shaw with Andrew Luck and Harbaugh being out there when Harbaugh was there with Andrew Luck at the quarterback position. So I think if Vanderbilt can kind of bring in that top tier recruit quarterback that can kind of get the job done and go out and win games, I think Vanderbilt, can have a season like Arkansas is having this year.
Yeah, I think you need a guy that's definitely obsessive over recruiting too. You need to get a staff that recruits extremely well and is all about recruiting to a certain extent, because you got to do more digging than anyone else. So tough hire, tough gig. And I'll tell you what, if I'm someone like Will Healy at Charlotte, my name's mentioned with every job, Billy Napier, I'm sitting around, I'm waiting for the next call if Vanderbilt calls me, to tell you the truth. So Vanderbilt's a tough prospect. That's a tough one. They need to go off the board a little bit. And best of luck to Derek Mason going forward. All right, let's go to the MAC. Miami of Ohio 38, Akron 7, Louisiana Monroe Louisiana. The Raging Cajuns put up 70 on Louisiana Monroe, 70-20, get the victory in that rivalry game. North Texas falls to UTSA 49-17. South Alabama 38, Arkansas State 31. Improving team at South Alabama. Good season for them so far. Appy State 47, Appalachian State 47, Troy 10. Mississippi, Ole Miss gets a 31-24 victory over Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. This was a game that at the beginning of the year, before, going back to February, right, when these two coaches were hired, Leach and Kiffin, we were fired up about this one. We thought this could be crazy game. Up and down the field, lots of scoring. A little bit of mistake prone at times, prevented some more scoring, but there's about 1,000 yards of offense in this game. So you gotta be pretty pleased with that effort. I think they did go over 1,000 yards of offense in this game. You gotta be pretty pleased with the effort from either side. Mississippi State certainly was a little shorthanded this year. They end up battling tough in this game. Nothing to hang your heads about if you're a Bulldogs fan. I think they only had 40 something scholarship players, under 50 scholarship players travel for this game. And they played tough the last 2 weeks with Ole Miss and Georgia. So good to see Mississippi State taking some positive performance against Georgia and Ole Miss into the offseason. They got Auburn on the 12th as a makeup game remaining. And that will be it for the Bulldogs heading into the offseason. Ole Miss, important for Lane Kiffin to get a win in the Egg Bowl. Definitely they were expected to win. and looks like they're going to play that postponed game with Texas A&M on the 19th. Rob, heading into the offseason, obviously a ton of work to rebuild Mississippi State. Ole Miss, let's see who you're losing on the offensive side of the ball. Whose stock are you buying going forward, Kiffin or Leach? Buying Leach low. You could buy Leach low right now. That could be a good value.
I'm definitely buying Leach's stock as long as he stays at Ole Miss. For some reason, I just don't think he's going to be there that long. I think he's going to get a better gig, and he's definitely going to take it, and he's definitely going to excel. But right now, I'm really going to buy stock in the better quarterback, and I think Matt Corral at Ole Miss is the better quarterback of anyone on the Mississippi State staff right now. Florida tried to recruit this kid coming out of high school, and that whole debacle with going back and forth on Twitter and everything, which a lot of these young high school athletes do during recruiting, national recruiting time. So I think Matt Corral is just a really, really good quarterback, and he has the arm talent. He can make every throw in the book. And so as long as he's attached to the hip with Lane Kiffin, I definitely buying stock in Ole Miss and Kiffin as well.
Good season for both coaches. Well, not a great season for Mississippi State. Let me tell you about it. Good start for Lane Kiffin though at Ole Miss. Mike Leach, you see a lot of turnover. A lot of it probably caused by him. I think he's running some guys out of that program. And I worry about Leach recruiting up against Kiffin. I think Kiffin is aiming for the moon with Ole Miss, and I think he's really his square target is Nick Saban. Whereas I think Leach is kind of a guy who goes, let's get a few guys who fit here and there. And I think it's kind of more of a go about your business. But I definitely am excited to see what Mississippi State looks like when they get Mike Leach's guys fully in the system, because I think that offense, he's not been shut down wherever he goes. It was a rough year this year, but I don't think that they had the horses to make the adjustments like they do at Washington State, like he did at Texas Tech. So give it some time, Mississippi State fans. I think you'll end up seeing the benefit there. All right. Boston College beats Louisville 34-27. Colorado beats San Diego State 20-10. A pickup game. Memphis over Navy 10-7. Georgia Tech 56. Duke 33. Baylor comes back, beats Kansas State 32-31. Last second field goal. Washington over Utah 24-21. The Utes led in this game. This is a game I was checking in on. I believe the Utes are up 21-0 in this game. Washington ends up scoring 24 second half points to come back and win. Huskies stay undefeated at 3-0, but like we said earlier, Rob, I'm not going to give you much credit for missing games in an already shortened season here, Washington.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I thought this was actually a good game. I don't know if you got a chance to watch this game, but it definitely was a back and forth game. But just like you said, you can't give a team credit for a shortened season. So I just like I said before, I thought Oregon was its best shot for the Pac-12 to put a team in there, but now that they kind of went down, I think the Pac-12 is officially out.
Well, Washington and Oregon, they end up playing in a couple weeks anyway, so we'll get to see those two teams go head-to-head. UCLA over Arizona, I only noted them on our chart this week because, once again, Chip Kelly's team, you get another win here, 27-10. I think they said it was only I think it's one of the first. I think they said it's the first time the Chip Kelly era the Bruins have been 500 or better, but Dimitri Felton, 32 carries, 206 yards. Watched a little bit of this game. And Britton Brown, too, 16 carries, 72 yards. UCLA's got some running backs, man. They got some horses in that backfield. This Arizona team looks pretty weak under Sumlin. And you just watch these two programs here, and I was just – all I kept thinking of, I watched a good part of the second half, and I just kept thinking, these two teams feel like they're going in drastically different directions. And not just because of how they're playing that night. It's just you saw the players on the field. UCLA's got some ball players out there now with Chip Kelly. Just need to start seeing the results come through.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think Chip Kelly is kind of coming to a zone out there at UCLA. If he can get his personnel on the field, we know what his offense is capable of doing, especially on a collegiate level. So I think I can definitely buy a little stock in Chip Kelly moving forward because he definitely has some, talent out there.
All right, TCU 59, Kansas 23, Hawaii 24, Nevada 21. The upset win. I think Nevada was 2-touchdown favorite in that one, by the way. Charlotte has a game rescheduled with Western Kentucky till Tuesday, December 1st at 10:30 a.m. 10:30 a.m. Watching too much college football. Rob, you get to watch your 49ers play on a Tuesday morning. How about that?
I know, right? If I didn't have to go into work in the morning, I definitely would consider watching that. But I definitely might try to. I definitely might try to stream that one in the office right there.
Hey, man, don't you guys show games where you work?
Yeah, we do. But that particular one might not be
Maybe not.
on. Yeah.
Too many other
So,
good college football games on Tuesday at 10:30.
I mean, with college basketball coming back, I think that takes full precedent as well for a Charlotte team. But
Good point.
but great game to they're going to have on Tuesday. I just love to see these games getting rescheduled rather than just getting canceled altogether.
Yeah, but we're running out of time on the calendar. That's the only problem. We're starting to get up against it. We were talking about that a few weeks ago. So, Rob, I'm done. I don't have any more thoughts on college football. I think I wasted them all at the beginning. You got any final thoughts?
Yeah, nothing for me. Once again, another great college weekend. Really good to wrap it up.
All right. Let's send it out with an ad read. American Football Stories is brought to you by Coach Paint. Coach Paint is a great tool that allows us to add graphics to player highlight clips similar to the graphics you see on TV. Coach Paint offers the ability to clearly tell a straight video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game with Coach Paint today.
Thank you for listening to American Football Stories podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, American Football Stories. We are working to grow our network on YouTube and we'd love to have you subscribe. You can find us also on Apple Podcasts, on Twitter, at American FB Story, and on our website, AmericanFootballStories.com. I am Robert Parker. My co-host is Nick Knudsen. This has been another episode of American Football Stories.